Reagan movie has been trying to promote Ronald Reagan, and they've been running ads on Facebook. Interestingly enough, they ended up having a bunch of their stuff rejected because it was political in nature and may influence elections.
Elon Musk is being sued, along with many other people, most notably J.K. Rowling, for this issue of the boxer in the Olympics.
More speech equals more freedom, and less speech equals tyranny.
If you want justice, you need more speech. If you suppress speech, you end up with more injustice. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, right?
Yeah.
This notion that truth...
Down the dark shall be brought to the light.
Right.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Right now, I want to go ahead and remind you, be sure to like and subscribe to our podcast, the Pop Culture Contrarian. Tell your friends about us. Share us on Facebook. However you want to do that, help us get more reach.
Yeah, make sure to hit that notification if you're on YouTube, on Spotify, leave us a review.
Yep. All right, our topic for today, we have titled Woke Religion Flails Against the First Amendment, that is.
Indeed, yes.
So let's start at the beginning. We've got a few different topics here, but we'll start with the Reagan movie that we're going to be talking about here soon.
Amir missed me.
Because it comes out this month on the 30th. And it's starring Dennis Quaid as Ronald Reagan. It looks like it's going to be really good. I think we're all excited for it. They've had some troubles in Facebook, isn't that right?
That is correct, yes, in the advertising department.
Again, I'm in advertising.
Which I personally know a lot about from our struggles with our parent organization, the Patriot Post, and trying to utilize those same channels that everybody else seems to have access to.
Yeah.
But in this case, the Reagan movie has been trying to promote, well, Ronald Reagan. That's the focal point of this movie.
Right.
And they've been running ads on Facebook. And interestingly enough, they ended up having a bunch of their stuff rejected because it was political in nature and may influence elections.
And it was a Reagan quote that got that.
That's
tag.
correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, when did that policy start?
Because I feel like it hasn't always been that way.
No, it started after the 2016 election.
Yeah, I want to say, because I remember because of the 2016 election,
A lot of things changed.
That's where we started to getting this whole, which I think is farcical, but we get it, was the concern over election interference because Russians at the time.
Right.
I think the Russians feel my profile is too high.
Which was completely and totally debunked like 8 different ways.
We're sharing misinformation or disinformation on the platform, and that impacted enough people to vote the wrong way, was basically the kind of the
Well, that was the public rationale. I think the private rationale was Donald Trump effectively used social media to boost his campaign, and we don't want Trump to be able to do that again, so we're going to make rules so he can't.
Yeah. And so a common occurrence for anyone who, in our audience, who might know about this, when you're in the back end of Facebook dealing with their policies, is it's like you have no advocates.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to get a hold of somebody who can really help you. And even for a high profile outfit like this, you basically have to get on your own platform outside of Facebook and scream at the media and be like, this is happening to me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have no recourse.
Yeah.
And that's what Dennis Quaid did.
Precisely. And as a result, lo and behold, he sent a letter to Zuckerberg essentially publicly and said, listen, this is wrong because we're promoting a movie from a political figure, yes, but he hasn't been on the ballot for 40 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not on the ballot, and it's not going to influence an election. This is about a great American president.
Well, if it's going to influence an election, it's because people know history better. And shouldn't that influence an election?
Yes. But the big point here is it's not intended to be politically motivated.
Right.
Well, just the concept of fear of influencing, to me, it's a red herring.
No, Mr. Green. Communism is just a red herring.
Everything a politician does or anybody does
could influence. Yeah.
Could and does influence people. It influences opinions. It influences thought. That's what happens when speech happens. You're influencing people.
And I think Dennis Quaid said this really well.
Yeah, go ahead and read what he said.
Yeah. So one of the issues they had on Facebook was trying to share an interview between Quaid and Jordan Peterson talking about the movie.
They wanted to promote it.
They wanted to promote the video of the podcast, and they were told they couldn't. And Dennis Quaid said, if a conversation between the two men, himself and Peterson, could influence an election, then by their own tortured logic, then shutting us up would also be deemed election interference.
Yeah.
Which is exactly right.
Yeah. Speech suppression.
Yeah.
So Facebook did respond, and they alleged, after going and looking at the back end, that their technology had incorrectly labeled it, and then they fixed it and restored it and whatnot.
So they got an actual human on it.
Yes.
But here's the thing, and this is what you're going to be able to tell us all about so well. That's so hard to do.
It's so hard to do. It almost never happens that way. I could give you dozens of examples that have happened to us at our parent organization, the Patriot Post, where we have had stupid things leveled against us.
Tell them about the image of the flag.
Which flag?
The ISIS flag.
Oh, yeah. So for years ago, we had a columnist write an article about essentially the state of various terrorist organizations in the world.
Right.
And actually reporting on some wins for the West.
Right.
And it was in no means advocating for a terrorist group. It was a very academic.
It was just saying, this is what the state of things are now. This is the
state of things. Yeah. Right. Okay. It did include a picture of an ISIS flag.
Yeah. A caravan of ISIS trucks with a flag.
Yeah. I mean, it could have even been an AP image for all I know. I don't know. It was like a stock image.
Right.
Well, we got hit with promoting dangerous terrorist organizations, and that was a strike against our page, and it has real implications. I mean, what they experienced with Quaid's outfit is, and when you try, and this is a little bit different, but when you try and promote an ad and it gets rejected, that's basically a strike against your social credit score, essentially, is what it is. They use different language.
Yeah.
But the same sort of thing in this instance was technology.
I'm glad to be joined by my science and technology advisor.
And to an extent, I do get it. Facebook is so massive, they can't have enough people to look at everything. I mean, there's like billions of people on there. But still, if you are going to have something totally out of context, and this is out of context, what we experience is totally out of context.
Right, because the image was not promoting terrorism in any way, shape, or form.
Not in any way. When you should have the ability to contest it and have a real person look at it. They got that because of prominence.
Yeah, because Dennis Quaid is a famous person who people listen to.
We are not so prominent in our humble shop.
Yeah.
So it just sits on there and impacts our page negatively for a year.
Yeah, they just ignore us.
Right.
Yeah.
I will say a caveat. There have been a few rare exceptions where I've gotten messages back where they said, oh, we got it wrong. Our technology got it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's rare for that to happen. It does happen. It happened in this case. It has happened for us.
Yeah.
But it's almost never. And it's very common to have unjust strikes negatively impact your business.
Right. Yeah. I just briefly want to touch on how they're passing the buck, because it used to be you'd have to have a person look at this or something like that and then say, no, we can't share that. And then if that person got it wrong, then eventually they'd get fired. Right. But when it's technology, or at least when they say it's technology, there's no one to blame. You can't be mad at them. So there's never any repercussions for Facebook for doing this. So it's totally painless for them to suppress you. And then when you have a valid appeal to be like, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. There's no downside to them.
Well, they do the same thing with fact checkers. They're a third party organization. They made the decision. You need to talk to them. We can't do anything about it.
Right.
And it's like this feedback loop that is perpetual where there's nobody to talk to about it. And just one more aside, because you got me fired up, Sterling. The whole, as I said previously, the whole missing context, that is something that they don't apply to themselves most often, but they'll apply that to you.
Oh, yeah.
When they say your article or content is missing context. But anyway, that's
so
a little too far
Facebook
afield.
does not behave fairly. They use this debate between are they a platform or are they a publisher to they use it both ways to get the best of both worlds.
Yes, you can't have it both ways.
And that leads us to our next topic. which is Elon Musk is being sued along with many other people, most notably J.K. Rowling, for this issue of the boxer in the Olympics, the Algerian boxer who had a test come out that said that this person had XY chromosomes. And there's been, as we have talked about on the podcast, it's not quite clear. It's not cut and dry. Is this person a man? Is this person a woman? It's not clear, but people were saying this is a man and he's beaten up women and that's not right. And as we said, that's not that clear that that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, so France is where this boxer's suing from, I believe.
Because that's where the Olympics took place.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
this is a cyberbullying lawsuit.
You're right.
Right. Which itself, I don't know how well that is defined and really well understood. That seems to be a bit subjective to me to hear that term cyberbullying.
Cybercrime.
I mean, the cyber part is clear. The bullying part is subjective.
Well, it is subjective in this case, assuming we get a solid answer. Is this person a man or a woman? And it came out that this person is a woman. They're maybe had high testosterone, but it's just plain a woman. If that happened, then I agree that we need a good definition of cyberbullying. But to me, it would be clear that that's what this had been.
Well, this is what I will say. I think that there's a better legal framework for this to happen, and it's under a well-established framework, which is defamation. That would be you are lying about and destroying someone's character falsely.
Yeah.
Falsely accusing them of something. So defamation to me seems like the better legal category for this type of a suit. But this cyberbullying, that's too subjective to me to really be able to establish, someone can say they're bullying. Well, if the person truly believes this about another individual and they're stating their truly held belief, let's flip it the other way around. If an individual, according to this woke world we're living in, if an individual identifies and believes in their brain that they're the opposite sex, then supposedly they're supposed to be able to say they are, and nobody is supposed to be able to question, because that's how they truly believe and see themselves. Well, why doesn't that work the other way for someone who says, well, I perceive you this way, this is what I believe you are, and therefore I am stating my, as a term that we use in this world now, my truth. So what you're doing is you're bashing two subjective kind of views.
It's another example of getting it both ways.
Right. And that's my problem with it. So you have to have clearly defined, non-subjective as much as possible, legal laws or rules, so that and they need to be very clear as much as possible so everybody can see it. This is what our frustration with like Facebook has been. Is it the rules, it's so opaque how they apply this stuff. They don't tell you, they'll give you generalized kind of categories. You have to avoid these, you have to do this. Like they may even say you can't be cyberbullying. Well, what is that?
Yeah. Well, and that's something we'll come back to later in this episode is definitions of things and how do you define things. But just to tie up my comment about platform versus publisher, that's why Elon's being sued. As far as we can tell, Elon is being sued over this cyberbullying because he owns Twitter X, where these statements took place. And in Elon's position, I think you outlined it pretty well, Andrew.
Yeah. In a recent interview with Don Lemon, they were talking about censorship.
It was a pretty famous interview.
Right.
It was about, 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah.
Yes. Elon, and I'll paraphrase it, but essentially he laid it out to Don this way. He said, if it's illegal, we won't allow it to be published on X. If it's legal, you may publish it on X.
Right.
And basically Don was arguing saying, hey, we have a responsibility as gatekeepers. Don't you think that you have a responsibility to
basically censor?
To censor. Yeah. And he says, Don, you just want censorship. It's like, no, I don't want censorship. It's like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You just want control. You just want censorship. And I'm not going to do that because, and as you said, this is the question. This is the section 230 question of the publisher versus the platform.
Right.
And if it's a platform, that means you can't interfere with it outside the legal bounds of the law. Yeah. And if it's a publisher, you can, of course, you have full responsibility for everything that's said.
Right. To explain the difference there, a platform would be the telephone.
Yeah.
The telephone company AT&T is not responsible for what I say on my phone call to somebody else. Publisher would be CNN. CNN is responsible for what someone publishes under their headline.
Yeah, precisely.
Right. And obviously it's impossible for these media platforms to be publishers. They don't control. We, the people, are the ones who actually
Generate their content.
Generate the content.
This is the public square.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the public square.
And that's been Elon's position all along. But
Yeah.
it has been a difficult conversation for a while because all these social media platforms, they are a new category of thing almost that don't fit nicely into our pre-existing frameworks.
Well, I think I agree with you, but I think there's an element to it that we haven't talked about, but it's the fact that the internet is international. And that I think is actually the bigger thing I'm starting to see now here. It's not that necessarily Americans are, I mean, there definitely are Americans who are for censorship.
Yeah.
But I think the motivation for a lot of this is actually coming from the European Union and those who have never had a real good relationship with free speech.
Yeah.
They don't have a First Amendment.
Right. And so what their frustration is in their context and within their legal systems, they can police speech way more than happens in the United States. And
so they're uncomfortable with Americans online.
North America online.
Right. But look at, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And all these major platforms, Facebook was invented in the US, X was invented in the US, or Twitter. You have these public squares that are headquartered in a country that is the biggest defender of free speech
Ever.
And now they're coming and saying, we don't like the fact that we can't control what the information people get or what people are allowed to say and publish and other people are allowed to see. They want to control that, and they're not in a position to do so. So they're making these threats like this, like this suit. And it's saying, that's why I'm saying a defamation suit in my mind would actually work better because there's more legal accepted across the sea, legal.
Sure.
Well, it could be, and I've seen this point raised, that Khalif, this boxer, doesn't want to provide proof, and for defamation, they might have to provide proof one way or another.
Yeah, there's
and so cyberbullying,
depending on,
maybe it's again a case of having it both ways. I don't have to prove anything, and I can still take your money. It could be that. That's just speculation.
I'm guessing that based upon, as we're talking through this a little bit, I don't see how this is going to go anywhere because...
Well, certainly not against Musk. Like I don't think there's any way.
Yeah, I think J.K. Rowling, she may be in a tougher situation.
Because the British are cracking down on free speech.
And that free speech like crazy.
That and the thing you were just talking about leads us to the next topic here.
Right.
Which is the Crown Protective or Crown Protection, something like that, services.
Yeah, Crown Protection Service.
That doesn't sound Orwellian.
CPS.
Did you write down that quote, Andrew, or should I pull it up?
Pull up the quote.
Okay. All right. Let me get to it, but we'll keep talking here. So basically what they're saying is they're going to try to arrest people for what they say online. And we mentioned that last week.
Yeah. And it has come to light in the wake of all of the riots and protests and as some people are calling it, the far right extremist, essentially Englishmen just saying, hey, we want to be Englishmen online. And they are grouping in,
they're
conflating violence with quote unquote hatred speech, and more or less saying that, well, this is what was the term that they used? Online violence.
Yes. And let me just read some of the quote. There's various quotes here. I'm just going to read this one. They said they view online violence very seriously. And one of the quotes is, content that incites violence or hatred isn't just harmful, it can be illegal. The CPS takes online violence seriously and will prosecute when the legal test is met. What the legal test could possibly be is mind-boggling to me.
It's so subjective.
Because online violence is as you were saying earlier, Thomas, it's an oxymoron.
Yeah. What is that?
You can't be violent against someone online. You just can't be, because violence is physical aggression.
You can say mean things.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take it back to actual law. There are laws against incitement to violence, illegal violence, but that's not what this is saying. This is just, they've created this word, online violence, and it sounds like a bad thing. Ooh, but then when you start digging, well, what do you mean by online violence?
Fine. So, yeah, thought police, take me away.
And seemingly what they mean is
It's not video games where you're shooting people up on video games. I
Right.
mean, that to me sounds like online violence, but it's not that.
yeah, I mean, that would be the reasonable definition. But seemingly what they mean when they say online violence is any usually white person saying, hey, this is the kind of person who's causing problem in the UK right now. That seems to be what they mean when they say online violence.
It actually includes, as far as I understand, if you were to post video footage of violence that's being happening in the street, like let's say, because there are some videos out there of groups of Muslim men beating up a white person. That has happened.
Sharing the proof of that is the online violence.
If you share that, that can be classified as online violence because you're somehow, by sharing that actual event, you are inciting violence.
And the contention the UK citizens have had is that the usually Muslim men beating up people in the street aren't getting treated as harshly. They're being treated with a different system.
They're
of
saying,
justice.
yeah, it's a double standard.
Yeah.
It's because of the woke dynamic we're in, or this neo-Marxist dynamic that says this is an oppressed group, and so we'll treat the oppressed group with kid gloves. But if you're a member of the oppressor class, well, then you're going to get the book thrown at you.
Yeah.
And that's what people are getting frustrated with.
And adding to this, the CPS, which is what I'm going to call them here, have said to Americans, be careful what you say. We're gonna try to prosecute you too. They've even name dropped Musk as someone they're going to try to prosecute.
Like, we're going to extradite you to the UK and put you in jail for what you post online.
Yeah.
Good luck.
And of course, in America, we have the right to free speech, which is one of the most ironclad protections of free speech anywhere in the world. And it has historically been rigorously defended by Americans. But the response Americans have had to this statement from the CPS online
is very American.
It has warmed the cockles of my heart because the response has, to boil it down, been get wrecked. We beat you in 1776, so we didn't have to care about what you said.
Yeah. We have a First Amendment.
Yeah.
We told you we were independent a long time ago.
Right. Yeah. And that has been almost universally the American response to this. And Americans are even doing things like putting so many help tickets on their websites that the websites are like overloaded and can't work and stuff like that. So,
Wow.
Rah!
Indeed. I do think
Is that online violence?
Yeah.
Maybe it is. It
probably is online violence.
Yeah.
According to them, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I guess I would say if there's anything that might come close to it, it's like a DDoS attack or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, Thomas, I think to your earlier point about the international response and how different nations think about things differently. And I can appreciate that this is a moment in history unlike any other.
Yeah.
Because the megaphone has been handed to the masses. That's never happened before. So I can appreciate where these platforms are trying to figure out, how do we navigate this?
Yeah.
How governments are trying to figure out, how can we navigate this? But what you said earlier, Thomas, before the show began, and I think it really rings true, is that more speech equals more freedom, and less speech equals tyranny.
Yeah. And I think the way I was putting it, piggyback off it, if you want justice, you need more speech.
Yeah.
You'll end up, if you suppress speech, you end up with more injustice. And I think that is, history proves that. As the expression goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right?
Yeah.
This notion that
What's done in the dark shall be brought to the light.
Right. And free speech is the best mechanism for that to happen. It doesn't mean, when we say free speech, that there won't be lies propagated and misinformation and disinformation and all these buzz terms that they're throwing out there that are like these boogeymen that if we allow this, the whole world's going to collapse. No.
Right.
The solution is allow more speech, because that's how you correct disinformation or misinformation.
Because someone will say the misinformation, and then the people who have the facts will come and say, these are the facts, and you can verify this. And then the person sharing the misinformation gets
That's why
discredited,
Musk installed the community notes feature.
which has been a huge success.
Yeah.
But speaking of misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, the VP candidate from the Democrats for president right now, Tim Walz, says there's no free speech protections for hate speech and misinformation.
Well, he's
Wow.
misinformed.
He is misinformed.
Wow.
And he was specifically talking about, free speech, saying that there's no protections for that. The problem, Tim, is that who defines hate speech? Who defines misinformation? And the answer can only be some kind of government entity, which goes against the very fundamental core truth of free speech.
Yeah.
Well, again, this is the rule of man
Yeah.
versus the rule of law.
Right.
And we must ascribe to the rule of law, because what other standard do we have when it's just a arbitrary, I'm in power so I get to make the rules?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a standard that anyone should want.
That's a standard
Correct.
for injustice, as we say again, and a lot of suffering.
I agree. It's not a standard anyone should want. It is a standard some people want, and it's people who think they're never going to lose power.
To have power, unlimited power.
Right.
Because no one who ever thinks, I'm going to lose power one day, is like, let's make it so I can make the rules while I'm in power, and then the next person can make the rules when they're in power.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's just, that's your candidate for VP from the Democrats right now, who said no protection for misinformation and hate speech. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that should influence your thinking on this guy.
I sure hope so.
All right. Don't have a good segue for this one, but just something I saw, some news article that just blew me away. So it's being reported right now. All the details are not out. Secret Service is being cagey about it because it's the Secret Service. But what's being reported is that a agent at a North Carolina rally for Trump just recently, this is after someone shot at and hit Trump and failed to kill him a month ago, an agent was caught not at her post. Someone was doing a sweep. An agent was doing a sweep and found her not at her post, did find her in a situation room, which is meant for the president, nursing her baby.
Wow.
With 2 other family members there as well, allegedly. Secret Service agents on the job aren't supposed to have family members there.
No.
And can we just agree, all 3 of us, that women who have babies that need to be nursed should not be in a position where they should take a bullet for someone else?
Agreed. 100%. It's totally inappropriate.
This is just so mind-bogglingly obvious.
So what that means is this feminism.
This is because feelings matter more than facts, evidently. I can't fathom how, if you're a mother, a nursing mother, you should not be anywhere near a job where you're going to have to throw your life on the line.
Right.
Not in that sense. I'm sorry.
Because as a Secret Service agent, arguably the greatest fulfillment of your job you could do is taking a bullet for the president or the presidential candidate or whoever it is you're protecting. No mother in general, but especially no mother of a child that needs to be nursed, should ever be put in that position where that's the dutiful thing for them to do.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, let's take it a step further. We did see images from the assassination attempt of a couple female agents who, as all these agents are piling on Trump, a couple of them actually hid rather than jumped on. We can delve into that and say, well, they were scared or whatever, which they probably were, other things like that. But instinctively and naturally, women have a empathy, especially for children. That's how God made them. They bring new life into the world. That's one of the greatest things that they can do, which obviously no man can do.
It's one of the greatest things any human can do.
Right.
Period. Yeah.
And that includes nurturing that child. It's not just once they're born, they're ready to go and hit the road and they're good. No, they have to be nurtured for years.
Right.
And there's an empathy quality that I think is more innate in women than men because of that. And so a mother will give her life for her child.
And that's
with
good and just and right.
Right. That's that quality. But can you imagine in a scenario where she's got her little baby that obviously she's still breastfeeding this thing, and she has to make a decision potentially between, do I die to protect this president, and how does she not think in the back of her mind, I'm also supposed to be protecting my child?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. That was a fast way, but yeah.
Sorry,
exactly. I'm not.
I hadn't put that together until you explained that.
Right.
But that is a conflict of interest.
That's a conflict of interest.
Yeah. And people could say, well, a father could have a similar thing. Yes, but no. I mean, yes, the father wants to protect his family, but
Certainly.
at the same time, it's a different dynamic.
It is. Here's just a fact about men. If you're a woman listening, you may not know this, but I think every guy already knows this. Guys spend time when they're bored, usually in a public place or in church or whatever. I know I do this sometimes when I'm not fully engaged by the sermon. Oops, my bad. I'll be thinking about, what if there was an attacker who came to shoot up the church or whatever, and how would I stop them? And, would I be willing to dive in front of the bullets, and imagining doing that? And I think that almost all guys have similar scenarios they run through in their head.
Yeah.
And that's just a natural male thing. I don't think that's a female thing.
Not in the same sense, I would gather. I think I don't know if they even think about it for their children, although they probably, they do in another way. Maybe put it this way. Guys we just tend to be generally less concerned about general safety stuff, I would say.
Yeah.
Or maybe even less aware of it sometimes. Whereas I think women much more readily are concerned about, this, it's everything from what you eat to, when you should, all the things that moms are so good at, asking, did you remember to bring your coat or your lunch? Or, they're looking out for you like dads don't. Generally, dads aren't the ones checking up on that list of things with their kids. But,
it doesn't come as naturally.
No, but moms, I think it's just an instinct that's their nurturing instinct. They're looking out for their young. They're looking out for their kids.
Yeah, I think most often fathers are more typically engaged in acquisition and preservation.
So bringing home the bacon and keeping everybody alive.
Yes. And then mothers are more often drawn to cultivation.
Well, on your point, Thomas, I just made me think of a funny image that I love, which is it's a picture of a billboard, and the billboard is for some, medical treatment or something, in medical center. And the billboard says, this year, however many, 400,000 men will die of stubbornness, saying they won't go to the doctor because they're too stubborn. And then spray painted underneath that, it says, no, we won't.
No, we won't.
And that always makes me laugh.
Well, I will say there are definitely more masculine women and more feminine men.
Certainly.
And I assume, and I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that many of the women who are involved in the Secret Service might tend to be more of a masculine bent.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the responsibility for the cultivation of a child, by and large, it goes to the women.
Yeah.
And if you're having to literally break the rules for safety and protocol in order to fulfill your motherly duty, and then also fulfill this role of a protector at the same time, I think what I would say most of this is shame on the people who put her in that position.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't want her to get fired because she had a child.
No, absolutely not.
But
she needs to be put on an appropriate detail.
Exactly. She needs to be given some task where her duty as a mother does not conflict with her duty at her job.
Well, and let's just play out this scenario. What if the reason nobody was on that roof was because an agent who had been signed to watch that roof had to go feed her child?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you're now talking about the roof a month ago.
And we're not saying that's the case.
No.
But Tom's, I think, to your point, is this is the attitude of the current organization.
Yeah.
Well, and that's you're saying, what if these two things had happened together? And since both of them have happened within a month of each other, that's not an absurd thing to suggest.
No, I think there is a climate or a culture that has developed. It appears, at least within the Secret Service, that I don't know how else to put it, but it's elevated things for the purpose, I think, of political correctness, to bring up an old word, rather than for the actual purpose the organization exists for, which is the protection of the president or other political figures, which may require them to give their lives.
Yeah.
And if we're concerned about being woke about it, or politically correct, or DEI, or whatever the terms we are, which are political culture feeling things, rather than setting aside that and saying the practical reality is this is what this organization exists for, and we need the best people to be in the organization and not care about what they look like, just how good they are at their job. And it's the same thing with the military. We shouldn't be concerned about all these things within the military. Military's job is to win wars, to beat the bad guys.
Right. And we know in this situation with the Secret Service that what's happened is they were picking people based on what they look like or their immutable characteristics rather than their performance at the job, because we know the leader of the Secret Service who resigned had wanted to get to a 30% female Secret Service.
Yeah, I mean,
and that was her goal.
She boasted about that being a major thing, and everyone was effectively at the time thinking, at least in Washington, oh yeah, this is a noble endeavor.
This is, again, another example of the woke religion.
Yeah.
And it's a divergence from founding principles that we all know built our civilization.
Yeah.
And by diverging from them, we see all manner of issues. Jordan Peterson put it this way: don't tear down ancient fences when you don't know why they're there.
Yeah.
You know, you might question, people ask, why does it have to be this way? Why are these rules here? Why are these social norms in place?
And maybe they shouldn't be. But until you know why they're there.
If you don't know, like, very well, you might be unleashing a monster far worse than the perceived monster right in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the original version of that quote from Peterson comes from Chesterton. And his point is, you don't tear down a fence because there might be a bull on the other side.
That's right. Yeah, I think he probably was pulling from Chesterton.
It originally comes from Proverbs, I believe, where it says, don't move the boundary
Well, it's
lines.
wisdom being passed down.
It's generation upon generation.
Right. Yeah, don't remove the boundaries.
Don't remove the boundaries just because they're there.
Yeah.
But you can't tear down Mike's store!
Yeah. So we had another point we could have talked about. I think this has been a pretty good episode, though. So I think let's cut it off there. So we talked about Facebook versus Reagan and the troubles they've had and the troubles everyone, including us, has with Facebook suppressing their content. Talked about the cyberbullying case against J.K. Rowling and really Twitter or X, but specifically Elon. The British police, telling Americans what they can and can't say, and Americans saying, nah, you can't hurt us.
Get wrecked.
And this agent who was put in an impossible situation, I think is the correct way to view this. All right. Any last points on any of those? No? All right. I think we covered it pretty well. This has been our episode on woke religion flailing against the first. This is the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas Sterling and Andrew. We're brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's both right and it's free. You should like and subscribe. And we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.